We are live here with the budget countdown. 48 hours, less than 48 hours to go for one of the most anticipated budgets in recent memory, and certainly not only on the financial side but also on the tax side. So many expectations on the retro amendments, on the DTC, on the GST, on service tax, also on the income tax slabs and exemption limits. And to discuss all of these, to second guess what the finance minister may do, we have some of the foremost experts in tax in India. Gautam Doshi from Reliance ADAG and Dinesh Kanabar, Deputy CEO of KPMG in India. I'll also be joined in 5 to 10 minutes from my colleagues whom you can see here, Amay Kunti and Swapna from Tax Sutra. They'll get us some proprietary research that we've done on the past budgets and what we can expect from the finance minister. So I'll straight shoot the tough questions to Gautam Bhai and Dinesh Bhai. The three things both of you all expect that the finance minister will bite the bullet on the tax side. The three tough things that you all expect the finance minister to do. Dinesh Bhai, can you start first?
So I really don't know what the finance minister will do or will bite, but if I had to put three things which I think the finance minister ought to do, is first and foremost lay down a roadmap for GST. That's not really a budget exercise, but really he has to lay down a roadmap to say when does he expect the GST to get implemented and what are the steps which are being taken to ensure that GST will happen within that time frame, whether it is in terms of the constitutional amendment, whether it is in terms of the backbone, IT backbone which is required to be done. So all of that stuff, I'm hoping that's the first thing which should happen. Second is we have general anti-avoidance regulations imminent out there from 1st April. And clearly the parameters under which the SHOAM committee recommended a pushback for 2 years, they have still not been complied with, whether it is in terms of an internal debate, whether it is a regulatory framework, or whether it is training of the tax office. So therefore, again, I'm hoping that the finance minister at this point of time, in furtherance of what he said, that doesn't want to promote tax terrorism, will push back implementation of GAR at least by a period of 2 years. And third and final, I would be waiting with a bated breath to see how does the finance minister deal with the issue of retrospective amendment. And I'm now not here on the issue of whether the amendment will be reversed or not, but is there a framework which will be provided to say India will not have retrospective amendments on an ongoing basis the way we are used to having each year to overturn judicial decisions?
Yeah, Gautam Bhai, three things, and let us start with the point that Dinesh Bhai left off with, that is the retro amendment. How are you going to tackle it, Gautam Bhai? You've written a column that's gone viral on social media. You stand by it. You think that's the way forward, Gautam Bhai? And if you can take our viewers through quickly in 60 seconds, what that's all about, your solution.
I think it's, in a sense, it's an equivalent of GAR. If on the one hand you have a GAR, which deals with every situation where taxpayers are doing, say, planning which results in government not getting their due revenue. And the result is that the government has a power and an authority to override what is there on the contract, in the agreement, in the arrangement, and to look at the substance and tax the substance. Then I think similarly, can't the government have a power in those cases where the result would be to unfairly charge a tax, penalty or interest on somebody because of an amendment in the law at a later point of time or for any other reason, for government to be able to give that relief to him. So why can't there be a power under government equivalent to a GAR type of power to make a settlement with assessees? And again, it will have to have its own built-in checks and balances, just as GAR has built-in checks and balances to safeguard the assessee. This will have to safeguard the revenue. But if with those checks and balances we have a system, then I think wherever an unfairness creeps in, like say in the Vodafone case, one may feel that there is an unfairness which has crept in because somebody has gone to the Supreme Court, he has got a Supreme Court decision, the Supreme Court has said that he was right in his view, he is not taxable or is not liable. You can't ask such a person to pay a tax or pay a penalty and interest on that tax. In these type of situations, you should be able to make a settlement with them. That's really what that column is trying to say. And if I think we can do that, that's one amendment he can look at. The second is perhaps in that same context, and talking about what Dinesh Bhai was talking about, should the finance minister really make an announcement that hereafter no amendments will be made through the finance bill? They will only be made through taxation laws amendment bills and taxation laws amendment acts, so that there is enough time and room to debate those amendments. Government is able to understand the implications, and government may or may not thereafter ultimately carry them out. The moment you propose it in a finance bill, you don't have time. It must be passed within a certain time frame within which the budget must be passed, and you don't therefore have the ability to go back and give it up as easily as you can in a taxation laws amendment act. And I think that's what certainty and fairness to taxpayers is all about, that they should not be hit by a sudden amendment, retrospective or prospective. You can't even have an amendment which will apply to the current year, which comes only today. I can't really plan my affairs, and I should be able to represent before that amendment comes in. There should be enough public debate of what the consequences are, why that amendment is called for. So on each of these key points, I think we would want that it comes through a taxation laws amendment act, not a DTC. Mind you, I'm not saying a DTC, I'm not saying a wholesale rewriting, but I'm saying whatever rewriting is to be done should come through amendment acts rather than coming through the finance bill. That perhaps would be the second and major change which he can achieve. And the third one, of course, is the GST. But as Dinesh rightly said, it will be more of a roadmap. And roadmaps, unfortunately, even though this government has perhaps more credibility than the earlier one, as of today, even then government prescribed roadmaps, how much credibility they will carry will remain a question mark, because they are often able to go off the track and you are never sure whether the roadmap will be implemented. But we definitely
Gautam
need a
bhai,
roadmap for GST.
yeah, Gautam bhai, if I can quickly put you on the spot on the two, on one at least major thing that Dinesh bhai said, and that is on the GAR, deferral of GAR by 2 years. Yes or no? Do you agree with Dinesh bhai? Deferring GAR again. We are basically shifting the goalpost again and again on GAR, Gautam bhai.
I would agree only for one reason. I think we need to implement a GAR which is far more reasonable than the current one. Either we bring in most of the recommendations of the SHOM committee, make the GAR reasonable, then perhaps you may not defer it. But if you are not bringing in all those recommendations, if you are not making a reasonable GAR, then perhaps your really deferment is just an excuse. What we are really saying is we don't want such a GAR, and we don't deserve such a GAR. It is an unfair provision. It should not be there. So deferment is only a way of putting it. What?
Yeah. Before I go to Amay, I'll come to Dinesh bhai. Dinesh bhai, on share valuation and APA rollback provisions, two things that have been talked about in newspapers. Do you expect something in the budget, especially on share valuation?
So, first, if I may make a light-hearted comment, if you said you're doing some proprietary research, if you could do a proprietary research for the last 5 years of the number of rumors on amendments that are spoken before the budget and how many of them actually happen, it is the research worth doing. I don't think your answer will be more than 10%. But that aside, look at it this way. Why do you need to amend the law to give effect to an APA? The fact of the matter is that if an APA is done on a set of facts and margins have been agreed, any tax practitioner will tell you that it ought to get sufficient weightage for the past years. You only need to issue at best a circular that in doing the past assessments, you will take into account whether the APA situation applied in circumstances applied in the earlier years also. And I don't think any law is required. I don't think you need actually a budget change to that whole thing. What is the second question you said? Which was the other one?
Share valuation.
So again, I'm actually dreading what would a finance minister write on share valuation. The fact of the matter is that it's a very simple, straightforward proposition that in the context of a share subscription, there is no income arising, and therefore Section 92 has no application at all. I am told that earlier there was an opinion which was obtained from the Attorney General which seem to suggest that the tax office has a right to review such a transaction. But if you look at that transaction, the shell transaction, there was no transfer of ownership. There was no transfer even inter se within the group. Yes, is that something I would hope the finance minister does? It would be a great thing if he does. It would be something which I would very, very welcome.
In one line answer, Dinesh bhai, are the finance minister's hands a bit tied because the matter is pending in the High Court and we are awaiting the round two? In a
I
way,
don't
are the
think
hands
so.
tied?
I don't think so at all, because saying that means that first of all you will push the matter into a corner. You will ask an SSC to go to a court. The SSC will go to a court, and then you will say, now because you are in a court, I cannot make the amendment. I think if the government can be man enough to say, we do not believe this transaction is taxable, end of the matter.
Yeah, perfect. We go to Amay.
And that
Amay,
is where
co-founder and executive editor of
if I
Star.
can just
Yeah,
add,
Gautam.
if I can therefore just add
Yeah.
to what Dinesh was saying, you don't again need an amendment for this. You need just a clarification from the government. Can we agree? This is not taxable. And we are withdrawing all the assessments we have made. Why do you need an amendment when you have done something contrary to law?
Amay, I wonder if you can swap, you and Swapna can come in. Before I hand it over to you, Dinesh, I should reply to a light-hearted banter. Every year before the budget, we put out 5 things to watch out for. Luckily, the 10 things we put out in the last 2 years have come true, including the retro amendment prediction in 2012. We'll put out 5 things to watch out for tomorrow evening as well. But Amay, what are your expectations? What have you been reading up? And if you could also take us through some of the research we've done on the IT slabs and retro amendment. And sorry, in fact, the exemption limit.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Arun. I think continuing what Dinesh bhai and Gautam bhai said, I think the improvement of the atmosphere and atmosphere of certainty is one of the key aspects that government in their agenda, election agenda, and post that is specifically reflecting. One of the key area is strengthening the dispute resolution mechanism. I would think maybe not specifically through the budget amendment, but perhaps through the subsequent clarifications. Hopefully, government, if they clarify on strengthening the dispute resolution mechanism, for example, the DRP, for example, the Commissioner of Appeals, I think that will be one big aspect which especially the MNCs and foreign investors are looking at. Certainly, the domestic investors who too are worried about the long-term litigation process. Before I ask Swapna to comment, I had a question for Gautam bhai, and Gautam bhai, this is on the black money issue. A lot has been talked about in last 2-3 years about black money. This government also in their election agenda talked about black money addressing this particular issue. But if you look at all what needs to be done in terms of letter of law is there in the statute provisions. Gautam bhai, do you think there is anything more that this government can do, especially in the tax laws, to address the black money issue?
No, as you rightly said, I think the law is sufficiently clear. You have enough power to reassess, reopen, charge tax wherever you discover black money. It's a factual issue. How do you discover? How do you get to the facts? And I think that is not something which can be achieved by an amendment in the law. That is an investigative process. You need to change the way in which the investigations are done. And that is something which perhaps CBDT has to improve its investigative mechanism and machinery to be able to do
Perfect.
that.
Perfect. I think a lot of, especially the individual non-tax professionals have been talking about this black money when you talk to them outside, and this is really a sort of touchy issue for the government. Coming to the individual specifically, a lot has been said about the individual personal tax slabs, etc. My colleague Swapna Marathi, who is the deputy editor, she has led the research on ATC deduction and the personal income tax slab. So this has been a great expectation from most of the individual taxpayers. We've done some research on this aspect over the last 30, 40, 50 years. She will quickly take us through the key findings from this particular research.
Yeah, ma'am. As Narendra Modi came to power with promise of adhesion, and for an individual taxpayer, adhesion obviously means the reduction in the tax liability. The first research is about ATC. ATC provides a deduction for certain investments and savings. So ATC, probably many of us don't know that Section 83 was also there on statute book much earlier, and it came somewhere around 1967, and it remained on the status quo till 1990, when it was replaced by Section 88. Earlier also the provision was reduction from total income, and 88 changed it to reduction from income tax. And again in 2005, Finance Minister got the same provision of 83 back on the statute book with a higher limit obviously, but that limit of 1 lakh has remained unchanged till date from 2005. So a lot of expectation is there that this 1 lakh limit will go up to 2 lakh and will give a great relief to the individual taxpayer. We have compiled a research in which we have shown what was 88 rebate in since 91 till date till 91 till 2005, and from 2005 how it was remained static at 1 lakh, and also the other changes where they introduced additional investment avenue in the scope of this scheme. I will also introduce you to the second research, which is basically about income tax slab. We have captured details right from 1961, when the Income Tax Act, the current Income Tax Act came on the statute. Earlier, we obviously had the
Reduce the volume.
1961. You would be surprised to know that the income tax slabs were based on whether the individual is married and how many children he has. I was also surprised to look at these details. And actually, we've also compared the income tax slabs across the various countries in the world, not only the slabs, the highest income tax rate. And you would be surprised to note that at some point of time, India has the highest tax rate of 97.5%. And now we should be happy that it has come down to 30%. Still, we have a lot of expectations. We are expecting the limit of 2 lakhs to go to 3 lakhs and reach some relief. So I think
there I think Swapna, we will put Dinesh bhai first on the line. Dinesh bhai, it's not an easy decision. You have one of the pink papers, I think Business Standard, which has done a deep research and come out with the point that it will mean foregoing 30,000 crore of tax revenues if you increase the tax slab limit by from 2 lakh to 3 lakh. So if we are going to forego that much of tax revenue, you think the finance minister can do it? Are we going to see a meaningful increase of the tax slabs? Dinesh bhai.
So before I answer that, if I can, with your permission, make two comments on things which have been discussed thus far. Ame spoke about dispute resolution, and I think one of the things I'm really hopeful is something to really happen on authority for advance ruling. As you know, that body has become virtually redundant. We need to ensure three things there. First, that we have chairman who's actually there and doing nothing but authority for advance ruling. Number two, we need more benches, not just in Delhi but across different locations. And we need an extension of the scope to include domestic taxpayers also. I think if this happens, this body could actually become one of those bodies which really can help sort of mitigate tax pain. That's number one. There was this issue which we discussed about black money, and I just wanted to make an observation that as FICCI, I chair the tax committee for FICCI, and one of the things we have undertaken is to a project where we would like to come back and talk about domestic black money and what is it that the government can do in concrete terms to rein in the black money. There are no illusions to say that the government does not know what it needs to do. But every year, as we go and engage into a dialogue with the government, a question comes in that all chambers of commerce really ask for concessions but don't give ideas to expand the revenue base, and we really want to do that. Coming to your specific question, there are really three observations I would make. If, as you said, the tax exemption is increased by a lakh of rupees, there is 30,000 crores of revenue foregone. We are not really looking at what does that mean in terms of releasing time of the revenue in order to enable them to pursue something which is more meaningful. That's number one. Number two, and I'm sure you can do this research, every time the exemption limit is raised, the number of people who then file returns just above that limit just goes up dramatically. So you will find today that if a tax exemption is 2 lakhs, there will be so many people who will be between 2 lakh and 2 lakh 25,000, and you'll be surprised to know that if you raise it to 3 lakhs, how many people will file tax returns showing income between 3 and 3.25 lakhs. So that's second thing. Third is that savings in the hands of people on account of that tax which has foregone, what multiplier effect does that have, is again very, very significant. And let me make a controversial remark. Our maximum marginal rate of tax is quite decent. I'm equally sure if you did research that if you increase that maximum marginal rate by say 2.5%, that 30,000 crores which you have foregone could be easily recovered. So really it's a question of how do you balance, how do you ensure that small taxpayers are not harassed and you release the revenue administration burden.
Yeah, Gautam, if I can come to service tax quickly on you. Both Arun Jaitley, we've been running a feature Retro Rewind. We have been looking back at BJP leaders' speeches in Parliament on the 2012 budget. You look at Arun Jaitley's speech, you look at Piyush Goyal's speech. What stands out, what absolutely stands out is their opinion on service tax. Both of them, especially Mr. Arun Jaitley, felt that the negative list was one of the most retrograde moves in the last 10 years of the UPA budgets. And he said that you're going back to a pre-91 mindset. And on negative list, he actually said that it seems that the finance minister, in a lighter vein, he said that even if you go to public toilets, you'll probably have service tax on you. Gautam bhai, you really think having taken such a aggressive stand against the service tax negative list 2 years back, you think Mr. Jaitley is right now in a position to undo that negative list?
Hello.
If he does that, do you think he should do that? And if he does that, do you think that will be very good? Gautam bhai.
I think the question really is, and something which Dinesh said, which you say, and which almost everybody is saying, is we want GST. And we are asking for a roadmap to GST. At this stage, to go back on the negative list is in fact taking a step backwards from GST, because this is something which you need if you need to move towards GST. So I would not really see why one should go back. If you need to make it more palatable, even within a negative list, you can give more exemptions wherever required, so that a public toilet does not become taxable. So that's all that is perhaps really required, is an additional list of exemptions targeted to the areas and services which deserve those exemptions. But otherwise, I think it's perhaps one of the best steps in preparation for GST. And I would hope that the finance minister does not think of going back on it, but only thinks of making it more workable. That is really what is important. And there perhaps one key rule which is also a problem is the place of provision of services. That's a rule which perhaps needs an amendment. They have tried to rope in a number of services which really are export of services, which are effectively getting taxed because of this rule. That rule perhaps needs an amendment, so that you clearly know where service is provided, and therefore who is liable to tax it, India or the other country. That's what I would say.
Yeah, Gautam bhai,
I would like to just ask a question.
Sure, please.
Yeah, Gautam bhai and Dinesh bhai, just one point associated with this. Whenever we talk about indirect tax issues and the dispute, etc., we end with a discussion that GST is a solution to this. But GST itself will take some time, even if the roadmap and the framework is announced. Till that time, do you think that there are any immediate quick fixes that government should consider, especially the duplicity of the state and the central levies is one of the issues which is affecting almost all the transactions. Quick comments on this, Gautam bhai and Dinesh bhai will be very interesting.
I think one solution is the CST, which has already been brought down, let's say, from 4% to 2%. Why can't it be reduced to 1 and to 0? Because that's really another factor which is standing in the way of the GST. If you can really do away with CST, 60-70% of the problems in the conceptualization of GST can really be taken care of. Because that's one tax which is really causing a major hurdle. That's a move which we can do even without waiting for GST to come.
Yeah, on the GST, in fact, Gautam bhai, Dinesh bhai, if I can look at Piyush Goyal's speech, and I just quote from here, this formula is that the GST would comprise two sections, one a central GST and the other a state GST. I don't understand what would be the benefit of such a GST that they are proposing. This is what Piyush Goyal said in Rajya Sabha in 2012 in reply to the budget, in reply to Pranab Mukherjee's budget. Dinesh bhai, a central GST and state GST. Are we really killing the GST?
Not
Is it going to be
really.
worthwhile?
No, so the only reason why you had a center and a state GST was for allocation of resources to the state. And again, there being a commitment on the part of the government that any loss will be made good by the center. So, and again, we are speaking of a single assessment, not dual level assessment. So, in a sense, it's just a single levy broken into two parts, and that is probably one of the things we have to live because we are a federation. I don't see really that has really been a key issue.
Okay. Okay. Gautam bhai, on the corporate, you represent corporate house. On the corporate side, Gautam bhai, I know a lot of people are saying it's time to do away with exemptions and deductions and so on and so forth. But yet you have the chambers asking for some goodies because the sentiments are down. This is the time to push infrastructure, to push other sectors, and therefore we need the exemptions and deductions. Gautam bhai, are you going to be batting for deductions and exemptions for the
I
corporates?
think the,
And if
I
yes,
think
which
whatever
ones?
batting, I think whatever batting was to be done has been done. Now we are only awaiting the result, whether the shot has worked or whether it's inside the boundary line and you're caught, and therefore the exemptions are withdrawn. So that's the one is not really, yes, clearly see, one is always wanting a benefit, one is always wanting a deduction, but then tax can never be the driver of a commercial decision. If that project makes sense on its own, it's only then that you will do it. It must make commercial wisdom. Tax can be the icing on the cake, can make that slight difference to doing a project which you might otherwise not do. But tax as a means, if especially used well, particularly for investment and maybe for employment, which is one of the key areas of focus of this government, if we had deductions more focused on employment and employment generation, then I think that should really work. And that's a deduction which this government can introduce. And that may be more effective to achieve what they want.
Yeah. Closing thoughts from everyone, and then I'll come to Amay for some closing remarks. Gautam bhai, Dinesh bhai, is this going to be a political budget or an economist budget? Are we going to go back to what Dr. Manmohan Singh said? If you that did 25 years back, it was an economist budget. Are we going to see a pure politician's budget or an economist budget, Gautam bhai?
Clearly, I think the answer is a compromise. You can never have one or the other. I think the time is true that we need an economist budget. We don't need a politics budget. And this government doesn't need to give a politics budget at this stage. So therefore, this is an opportunity to give a budget which will really allow the country to progress, for industry to progress, and for employment to be generated. So let's hope it's an economist budget, but a few political overtones are a must and a necessity. Those will perhaps come through.
Yeah. Gautam, Dinesh bhai?
I think actually, rather than going down this question of whether it be a political or an economic budget, the reality of the situation is that the government has just come to power, has barely come to grips with the economic realities. We have a drought overhang, we have the Iraq overhang. I think what this budget is likely to do is to announce a slew of measures where the government is going to come back and say this is how we intend to put economy back on rail, whether it is in terms of how infrastructure projects will be implemented, how environment clearances will happen, etc., etc. In terms of content, in terms of actual changes to tax laws, I think it will be de minimis.
Oh, that's a very bold prediction from Dinesh bhai. We'll come back to him on Thursday. Dinesh bhai, you can see the Argentina t-shirt here. That's because the Holland t-shirts were out of stock. I'm absolutely for Holland tomorrow. Dinesh bhai, your pick for the semi-finals tonight and tomorrow. Quick.
Well, let's say
You're not
today's
letting him
match
go
is
away
going to
without
be
that.
today's match is going to be a more interesting one. It's almost the final, and I'm waiting with bated breath to watch Brazil and Germany, and it's going to be really, really interesting.
No, Dinesh bhai, you have to give us the two winners from the semi-finals.
Well, if I was betting at the risk of offending people, I would say it's going to be Netherlands versus Brazil.
Wonderful. Gautam bhai?
I think that's a more difficult prediction than trying to predict what Arun Jaitley will do on the 10th. And I don't think one should try and venture into that.
Yeah.
Gautam bhai has been safe. Amay, any closing thoughts? And of course your picks
No,
as
I think,
well. Quick closing thoughts.
no, I think for sure this budget I will miss poems from famous saints in southern part of India. So I hope something new comes up this year, and my pick will be Netherlands Germany final.
Swapna, your take?
Brazil and Germany final.
Oh, absolutely. Swapna has been in Germany for some time. Thanks so much, Dinesh bhai, Gautam bhai, Amay, Swapna. Thanks everyone for your time. I think it's been quite an exciting pre-budget round. And let's hope that Dinesh bhai is wrong and we actually see some big bang action on Thursday on the tax side. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll be back on Thursday with roadblock coverage on Union Budget 2014 on taxsutra.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.